All right, we might as well get the meeting started. This is a special meeting for the Community Development Block Grant. Today is Monday, January 10th, 2022. It's 5:30. Pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, adequate and electronic notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in the Beach Haven Municipal Building, on the borough website, and mailing the same to the Beach Haven Times, the Asbury Park Press, and the Press of Atlantic City. Mr. Allen.
Here.
Mrs. Ballmiller.
Here.
Dr. Davis. Mrs. Rutherford.
Here.
Mayor Lambert.
Here.
We'll do the flag salute in the next portion of the meeting, so we'll just continue, okay? The Community Development Block Grant is a county-run program distributing federal funds, which over the years has been severely cut back. And the municipalities in the county have agreed to participate in the program on an every other year basis, Beach Haven falling on an even year. This allows for more meaningful applications with sufficient funding. Applications are limited to handicap accessibility to existing structures. And the borough is required to hold 2 public meetings to solicit any input on the grant application from the public. Normally we allocate or we request about $40,000 for this project. And we did talk about replacing the handicap accessible bayfront at Dock Road. And we talked to Frank today, and Frank, that project is not a viable option, right?
Yes, my concern is we received money some time ago to do handicap access at the bayfront at 2nd Street. And then after Sandy, when the boardwalk was destroyed, we had to reinstall it, and it included handicap ramps. So you can't apply to the block grant to rebuild something you should be maintaining. So the only other option we have, and we did this last time, was we went through town and looked at handicap accessible street corners along Bay Avenue. And if you remember, we did the corner of 8th, and we did several other corners that weren't ADA compliant.
Okay.
Over the years, you've been applying for a lot of projects where something hasn't been accessible and you're making it accessible, and that's what the program's all about. But if you have to build something brand new, you have to comply, and they don't pay for new facilities because it's a requirement that they be built handicap accessible. So your only option at this point, unless you're missing a ramp at some existing building, is to go with something like, doing the corners on the boulevard.
Is the community block grants only limited to increasing handicap areas that aren't
Yeah.
accessible?
Yeah, you don't, some towns have low, moderate areas, low, moderate income areas that are called designated target neighborhoods. Beach Haven does not have one. I think years ago, I think there was a small portion of Surf City that qualified, but since then, based on the census, you don't have a DTN. In a designated target neighborhood, if you had one, you could do sewers, you could do, you could do any municipal project.
Right.
We're limited to handicap ADA accessibility.
Okay, because there's not like 3
Yeah.
different types or 4 different types I was reading. We only qualify for the one.
Right. And I mean, you can buy beach wheelchairs. You can, some towns will do that. But how many beach wheelchairs do you need? I mean, I've had some towns buying them every couple years, but they're at the point where they almost needed a new storage building for the number of beach wheelchairs they had.
Right.
So
So
you can do something like that if you don't want to do a hardscape type improvement.
okay, because I was reading that, some towns have used for different things to improve their parks and
Right.
recreation. So we don't qualify for those. I
Well,
didn't get,
handicap accessible playground equipment, you could apply for. But you
Okay.
need to select those. The company called Game Time has a state contract,
Mhm.
and we have applied for equipment like that and been able to get money for that.
Okay.
So tonight's meeting is really just to kick around ideas. The next meeting, you actually have to, prior to that, decide on a project so that we can adopt a resolution authorizing you to proceed with the submission of the application.
I have a question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Last year, we did the curb cut in front of the post office for the handicapped accessible.
Right, that was one of them. Yeah, one of them.
Okay, is it possible to get retro active? I mean, like to say we did this, it was an off year for us, so.
No, you can't you really need to have the approval and the agreement signed by the county before you proceed with the project. You
Yeah, I
can't go
thought-
backwards and do things and get reimbursed in
Okay,
the future.
thank you.
So I have a question. So we are looking to institute the Gator program for handicap accessible ability to beaches and things like that. I know that was the Gator is actually gifted, but would maintenance of that and things like that be something that you could use? No.
I don't think you could use it for a maintenance item. I mean, once
Okay.
you get the Gator and using it for handicap accessibility, you have to maintain it. So
Okay.
there wouldn't
What
be.
about the purchase of a second one, Frank?
I have to check. I can check with the block grant program on that to find out if that's eligible. You're the first one that asked about that, but
Mhm.
I could certainly find out before we get, before the end of the week, and we'll know if that's a viable option. What do those cost? Anybody have any idea what the cost of one of those is?
No.
Oh, I forget.
I mean, we're gonna get we usually apply for 40 grand. They give you between 30 and 35.
Mhm.
I can't imagine one of those is $30,000.
No.
No, it wasn't.
Who knows?
Like-
No.
15, 20 maybe.
Right,
Yeah.
so, something like that, I'll check with them to find out if that would be an eligible item.
Okay.
What about handicap accessibility for some of our beach entrances? I know like Fifth Street is and Pearl Street is and Center is, but like how about any of the others? Would that
Well,
be something
if-
we could look at?
You could, but the accessible ramps to get up and over that dune are gonna be extensive. I mean, they cost, possibly $100,000 by the time you ramp up and crisscross and get back down to the beach. I think that it'd be too much of a project.
Okay.
We used to use mats, didn't we, to get up
Yeah.
and over beach entrances?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you still need to have the slope at 1 to 12 for handicap accessibility, so your ramp length becomes tremendous.
Frank, how about like the railings? Some beaches have them, some don't. The PVC railings?
Yeah, again, I mean, obviously there are people that could use those railings, but it's not gonna meet a handicap accessible slope
Right.
for a ramp.
Okay, any other suggestions from council before we open the floor to the public on this?
No?
Okay, at this time, we're going to open the floor to the public to solicit any ideas for the 2022 Community Development Block Grant application. If you have any ideas, if you'd like to raise an electronic hand, we're just speaking about the Community Development Block Grant application at this time. John Harvey?
Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, Frank asked an interesting question to
Just
start the
state your name and
conversation.
address for the record, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. John Harvey, 211 Second Street. You want me on video, right? Didn't you say you wanted that?
It doesn't matter to me.
I thought you had said that at a previous meeting. If people were speaking, you wanted them on video.
Not me.
Okay. Frank, you asked an interesting question, which is how many handicap beach chairs do we need, which I think is a good question. And then there was a lot of ideas. I guess, I question our collective wisdom, and I certainly don't, other than relatives, have experience or inside knowledge on the needs of handicapped people in the beach community. So my question is, wouldn't it make sense to maybe, there's plenty of organizations that support the handicapped in Ocean County. Wouldn't it make sense to maybe ask them to take a look at it and give us some ideas? Because even if we come up with an idea like handrails and stuff, it may not be the best idea. And then a question I have, Frank, you said 30 to 35,000. If something's too expensive, like let's say the handrails or the ramp to the beaches for handicapped is a good idea, is it possible to get a block grant and then supplement it with borough funds for the right idea?
Yes, you can supplement, you can add more funds to the project. So if you only get 35,000 and it costs twice that, the borough could fund the balance if they wanted to do that.
So then I just go back to my idea. I think this is a conversation that we should look at, not just this year, but going out and maybe have somebody take a look, give us some insight, find some really good ideas to aid the handicap, and then go for a block grant rather than simply trying to find a way to spend the money.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else in the public like to speak? Okay, John, I'll email you tomorrow. Maybe we can go back and forth about some suggested organizations. So I appreciate that. With no other public comment, we'll close the floor. What we'll do is we'll take a motion to adjourn the Community Development Block Grant meeting. If you'd like to go turn your cameras off and take a break, we'll come back at 6 o'clock for the regular meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Hey, Colleen,
Good to go?
it's just about 6 o'clock. There you go, 6 o'clock on the dot.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Borough of Beach Haven. It is Monday, January 10th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Please stand for the flag salute led by Mr. Allen.
Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to
the flag of the United States
of America.
and to the republic
Which is
Stands
one
One
nation,
nation.
under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice and electronic notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in the Beach Haven Municipal Building, on the borough website, and mailing the same to the Beach Haven Times, the Asbury Park Press, and the Press of Atlantic City. Mr. Allen.
Here.
Mrs. Ball Miller,
Here.
Dr. Davis,
Here.
Mrs. Rutherford,
Here.
Mayor Lambert.
here.
Okay, I will go ahead and give my manager's report now. I don't know why it was so low on the agenda. I don't know how I did that, but cash receipts in the current fund account for the period of December 1st through December 31st, 2021 were $792,309.89. Cash disbursements in the current fund account for the month of December 2021 totaled $2,777,051.63. Cash balance in the current fund account as of this period totaled $14,464,428.17. Cash receipts in the water utility account for the period of December 1st through December 31st, 2021 were $25,052.59. Cash disbursements in the water utility account for the month of December totaled $507,686.03. And the cash balance in the water utility account as of December 31st, 2021 was $3,941,821.73, submitted by our treasurer, Sherry Bowler.
Thank you.
Ordinances this evening, we have ordinance 2022-02C, an ordinance amending chapter 180, section 3, swimming pools in the Borough Code of the Borough of Beach Haven, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey. First reading. The purpose of this ordinance is to further regulate the dewatering operations, and this is a first reading.
Okay, since it's reading, there is no public comment, but would the council like to make any comments?
Sherry, you did change the dates for dewatering so that it goes from May 15th to October 1st,
Yes,
correct?
so no dewatering would be permitted between May 15th and October 1st of any calendar year. And the dewatering would be discharged into the stormwater system from on the east side of Bay Avenue to extend a dewatering hose to a storm drain located on Bay Avenue. And any pool dewatering operation taking place west of Bay Avenue would extend the dewatering hose to the closest storm drain. Any questions from council on that?
Yeah, well, now that Frank, you're on here, I'm still kind of concerned with these dewatering hoses, like Dan mentioned before, going across Beach and Atlantic Avenue.
I mean, typically, I've seen that before. I know years ago when they used a lot of water to install piling, they would go to the nearest fire hydrant and run hoses across those same streets. So I think it's better. Again, these aren't 6-inch hoses. They're usually 4-inch, fire type hose. And they put cones out and, the concern with the sewer was that you open the manhole and you have the hose going into the manhole, and now you have a potential with the manhole in the center of the road being unprotected, and somebody could really get hurt if a car goes into a manhole.
Yeah, I understand that.
And I've seen, and I did talk to, I think one contractor in particular says, hey, we have tons of hose, and they do it in other locations. I think I saw them actually doing it in the township recently, where they ran a hose down to the storm drain almost from mid-block toward the beach down the boulevard. I
Okay,
think the key is not to have the water, Jamie, as you said, running down the gutter and turning green.
Right.
And we get all this other material growing in our gutter line for 5 weeks.
Okay.
I don't think there's any other options really, unless you
Right.
made the people truck the water out in a truck. I think this is the best we can do. And if it does create a hazard with bikes, I don't think it will, but if it does, we can look at it again. I
yeah.
think that's one of the comments we had before.
I'm just nervous at night because I still see kids at night on their bikes because it gets dark so early. That's what I'm concerned with. That's all.
I mean, I understand that they're supposed to be flat. I have to say Sherry said they were going to stop dewatering the pool at Chatsworth Avenue today, but it's still running. I just walked by there. I literally ran back for this meeting because I forgot it was at 5:30. But I mean, there's a lot of pipe. There's a lot. I mean, it's a mess. So I agree, it's a mess, but I don't know how else we deal with it. I think this is the best we can come up with, and we can see how it works and try to tweak it.
Well,
Okay.
I did see language in the ordinance saying that the contractor is responsible for, pedestrian and biker safety with any device necessary. So I think, they need to heed that very seriously because, the pipes, my son, he's 8 years old. We have one on Liberty right now. And, he can stand on the thing and it doesn't go down. So
Really?
they're pretty rigid. Yeah.
Yeah, that when the water's going through them, they are pretty rigid.
And they're always on when they're on, rain or snow. So I think being off season will help as far as the bicycle enthusiasts that ride the little, the very thin tired bikes. But, as Jamie said, the kids at night, when it gets dark, I just don't want to see them get hurt. So.
Maybe they should put some lights on them. Or glow strips or something. I mean, the problem is though, the bikers aren't as careful as they should be. And I can blame myself as well, but
Yeah,
many of the
you
bikers don't have lights on their bikes and they don't wear light clothing, which is a problem. But it is, I can see a potential danger.
It's just where those are our designated bike lanes. I mean, have to make them safe. I think we're, should.
What other
try.
the other options though? There's no other options.
No,
Yeah, Frank, what do other people do in other towns? I'm assuming it's the same thing.
Well, a lot of them, like I said, till we started running into this problem, seemed like we were getting a lot of pools and we were getting a lot of green slimy water on the gutter line when they pump them for 3 or 4 weeks. So that was the big issue. My only other thought is when you get down to like Beach or Atlantic, we have these storm drains that bubble under the road, but you can't put a hose on one side and make a hose on the other side catch that water. If the storm drains are decent, you could have them thread it through the storm drain. I guess we'd have to look at one and see if that's even a potential to keep it from physically crossing the road.
I mean,
Would
as much as I would like it to see
Mhm.
directly go into Bay Avenue, I think that even on the east side, we might have to just go to the nearest storm drain. Not only that, it's the people on the electric scooters and the electric bikes
Yeah,
that I'm concerned with, because they can go, I mean, they're going up to like 20
yeah.
and 20 miles an hour, these electric bikes and scooters and whatnot. And I'm just nervous, just because we don't like the physical aesthetic outfall of this. I mean, we kind of have to err on the
Well,
side
I
of
guess what you
safety here.
could do is, let's start. If you're on the Ocean Block and you have to run a hose down the Ocean Block street, the first inlet you come to is the inlet on the east side of Atlantic Ave. And if you put the hose in there, then it's going to run out the inlet on the west side, and then it's going to run down the gutter all the way to the boulevard.
Right, it's gonna go down under Atlantic,
And then
all
it's
the way
gonna-
to
it's
beach,
gonna
under
surface,
beach.
and it's going to run down all the way down the gutter because you're not going to get a hose on the other side of Atlantic then. So you could make them just run it to the nearest inlet, and whatever flows in the gutter after that flows in the gutter.
That's what we're doing now.
Yeah, I know. That's what,
I think that I don't think we should be putting hoses across beach in Atlantic.
well, then all you can do is have them run it to the nearest storm drain
And
and let the balance of it run down the gutter again.
Well, that's what hopefully is happening. It's
Right.
going under the street.
But I mean,
But
if you're in the middle of between Beach and Atlantic, that's a lot of gutter line before you get to Beach. So you will
Well-
take care of some of it. But anybody below Beach won't have a problem because they can run the hose down and get into an inlet on the boulevard and not cross a north-south street.
right,
And
it's
so it's kind of, I think you're right, because if you have somebody on an electric bike or scooter hit one of those, it's not going to work.
and they're not wearing helmets either.
Yeah.
Like
So
Nancy.
I agree with you. From a safety standpoint, we might have to live with a 50-50 solution.
Yeah, I don't.
And not,
Well,
and maybe amend it and put in there that the hoses cannot cross the north-south roadways.
So should we be doing this for now and having a little more discussion about it?
I think can we amend it? I think what we need to do is just go back to the way it was and let them drain into the closest store drain and decrease, I would still decrease the time that they can dewater, and I'd keep that the same. And I think if we enforce the time period, that would make a huge difference, but we're not enforcing it. So, I
We
mean,
are.
well,
I have code enforcement out every day. That's how you got an update today, because code enforcement.
yeah, well, they haven't turned it off and it's been going for a month.
No,
So
today was day 15, so
it's
get,
still going. It was going a half an hour ago down there.
code enforcement will be there in the morning.
Okay. I mean,
So
there's
I'll
a
work on
lot
it.
of water and it's cold out, so then it freezes. But I don't know why we just can't, let's just amend the ordinance and say the nearest storm drain, the dewatering, keep the dewatering from May 15th to October 1st. No dewatering during that period of time, and just move ahead with it. I mean, why keep, we've talked to death on it as it is, and there's not much else we can do.
Okay, so I'll make some changes and we'll introduce at the next meeting then.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let's see, ordinance 2022-03C, an ordinance amending and supplementing chapter 145, pickleball courts municipal in the Borough Code of the Borough of Beach Haven, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey. First reading. And the purpose of this ordinance is to regulate pickleball operations.
Okay, since it is a first reading, there's no public comment. Would anybody in the council like to comment? No? I would.
ahead.
It was interesting because after the last meeting, I know the statement was made about a lot of new courts being built up and down the island, and that didn't jive with what I had heard previously. So I decided to fact check myself. And after speaking to all of the municipalities, everyone except Long Beach Township said absolutely not. They are not adding any new pickleball courts this year. Long Beach Township, I spoke with Mayor Mancini today, and he said that they still intend to build 4 new pickleball courts at the M&M site. I sincerely hope that that happens, but I have a tendency not to count chickens before they're hatched. And it really concerns me because this goes back to the original problem that Beach Haven has the most courts. We have the nicest courts. So we are going to be ground zero for people coming to play pickleball. I also had somebody reach out to me from the pickleball community, and they had listened to the tape and heard Jonathan, our attendant, explain what happened down there this year. And they said that was true. But it also didn't account for the fact that there was a big change in procedure, which was not mentioned. And that was the fact that the year before, Dave, Mike, Fuzzy, the attendant, was in charge of the whiteboard and moving the groups in and out and around at appropriate times. Apparently this year, Jonathan elected not to do that. And that's kind of where a lot of chaos ensued, because then other people decided that they would take charge, or it was kind of a free-for-all. And that also created a lot of problems. So while we got a picture, we didn't get the entire picture. And I am still very concerned that you are going to have 75 or more people showing up bright and early to take advantage of the earlier preferable playing time. And it's going to be chaos. I think we should keep.
There's still a maximum occupancy at the courts of 50 players. What we're trying to do is just remove the requirement for reservation required and just to utilize the whiteboard system, and then to implement some more authority for the attendant, and also add in the ordinance that non-compliance to the orders of the attendant may result in suspension or revocation of the court passes. But there is still an occupancy limit.
But who's going to enforce that?
The attendant.
The attendant.
Right, but hey, okay, we have the occupancy limit, but what if there's another 35 or 30 people or whatever still waiting out there? I think it's going to be an awful lot in the neighborhood. That was one of the big concerns I always heard from the beginning. So I'm just still concerned that you're going to have this overflow of people in there early in the morning, and it's going to be kind of chaotic again.
I have a question. How do you get, if there's no schedule system, which I totally disagree with, like I said at the last meeting, how do you get people to leave? What if you want to play all day? You can just play all day and just keep signing up. And, you know, if the attendant really had difficulty handling a schedule, how would they possibly be able to handle something with no schedule whatsoever and everyone just coming whenever they want? I just feel like it'd be more difficult to handle something that was less organized. But how do you get people to leave?
I guess you ask them nicely to go do something else until they have space at the court.
It is a public park, so they can be there all day. They can't be at the facility playing.
I think we should try to see if it works the way the pickleball people want to do it. And if it doesn't, we can readdress it. If it's chaos, I personally don't think it'll be chaos. I think most of the pickleball people are respectful. Yes, there's always people that can be disrespectful, but most of them really love the game. They have fun. They've made friends. I'm very proud of our pickleball courts, and I'm very proud that Beach Haven has taken a leadership role in promoting pickleball on the island. It is a sport that's growing throughout the entire country and even in Europe and in undeveloped areas of the world, believe it or not. And I feel very proud that Beach Haven has taken on this role, and I think the township sees the benefit of it as well. And I think we should see how it works. And we can always go back and say, no, it's not working. It's chaos down there. There's too many complaints. But right now, I think we should try to support the people that are running it and give them guidance and help them regulate it the way they think it should be regulated. We can always readdress it if it's a mess in July and change it by August if we have to. I don't think that's going to happen. Personally, that's my personal feeling.
Anybody else want to comment?
I'm not too sure about that, considering that he couldn't control it under his schedule. That he wasn't running it the same way that they liked it to run. You know, does that mean the attendants are just going to give the players carte blanche to, you know, do whatever, however they want to play? I mean, could it work? Potentially, but I see, you know, to be fair to the community down there, you know, if we move in July to put things back, it doesn't get fixed till August, that's the whole summer that they're going to have to endure down there with, you know, a situation that they were very much concerned with at the beginning of this conversation. So I'm kind of having a little bit of a conflicting opinion with myself, because I figured based on our last meeting that, you know, the attendant seemed to think that this was the way to move forward. And based on some of the actions of a few players, you know, the few bad apples that, you know, verbally, in his words, verbally abused his attendance, he wants to go to this. I
At
guess
the end of the season, last summer, at the end of the season, they did go back to a whiteboard system, and it was working fine at the end of the season.
okay.
With less people. Yeah, that's the thing, you know.
At the end.
Right.
What, like September, October end, or was this the height of the season?
No, it was the beginning of September.
That's when things calm down around.
Yeah.
Sherry, what are the stipulations? So if we decide that this is not working July 4th, can this be implemented the next week? And do we have a backup system to be able to put into place that now people will need to sign up and be told once they arrive without signing up that this is the new thing in place? Like, how does that work?
Well, we won't need an ordinance to do it. I mean, that's an administrative, we can administer the play at the courts however we deem fit. Last year we used the Sign Up Genius. We could certainly have it ready to go if we needed to on a whim. It was the end of August that the system was, that we stopped with the Sign Up Genius and went back to the whiteboard, and it was working fine. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, it does, because I think the concerns that I'm hearing from some of the council members is that this is going to take long to implement if we decide that these people are continuing to be out of control and not being able to manage how they play at the courts. You know, other courts on the island don't have a sign up at all. People just show up and play. So, you know, I'm fine with giving them the option and trusting that they know what is way to manage it. But I also want them to understand that a sign up will be put back into place if you can't figure it out, and we have to figure it out for you. So I like that the language has been added that people's passes will be revoked if they act inappropriately. I think that this is going to be required. We're going to require a little bit more oversight. So if you guys in the borough are willing to do that, then I'm fine with them trying how they want to try it.
Sherry, I have a question too. If we do this where we're limiting it to 50 and we're doing open, what's to prevent people from lining up at 7 o'clock to be among the first 50, knowing that there's going to be a huge influx of players in order to play earlier in the day as they all prefer.
I don't think that's going to happen. From what I understand from the attendance, that people come and go all day, that there's not a mad rush in the early morning, that they would prefer to stroll in a little later.
Because I know they said at one point, one of the people who was very vocal down there about how to, run the courts mentioned that it's dead after 11.
Mhm.
Remember, we were having the discussion about allowing the refereeing clinic and all that, and they said it's dead after 11. So we're talking about a 3-hour time period and all these people coming. I'm just very concerned about these logistics, and I'm very leery of them.
What do you guys
Any-
want to do with the ordinance?
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve 2022-03C?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Allen,
I will say yes, with the understanding that if this thing doesn't go as planned, that we reinstitute the scheduling. I like Chris's idea that we have this ready to go. If it's a madhouse down there, it won't take long to rein in and get it under control. So it's yes on those conditions.
Mrs. Ball Miller,
I'm a big proponent of organized play schedules, especially with July and August. You get a reservation at a restaurant, you get a reservation at a gym, you get in, you get out, you have fun, you enjoy yourself. You're in the middle of a residential neighborhood. We have to be concerned for everyone, both players and the community. No.
Dr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Rutherford,
Yes.
Mayor Lambert,
No.
Dan, the only other thing that thinking while you were saying that is that you really should, if you're going to do that, post at the courts that you're going to be re-implementing it by a certain date and give them a little bit of lead time so they know.
Give them a week.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
we'll go to our general discussion items. Number 1 is the proposed ordinance 2022-01C for outdoor dining.
Okay.
Who'd like to
Now-
start?
Are we going to open this to the public at this point, or you want to get counsel first, or how do you like to proceed here?
Can we discuss first because Frank's here?
Yes.
Sure.
So Frank, we already have an outdoor food consumption in our business district code that allows for outdoor food consumption. It's very similar to this proposed ordinance, but in the outdoor food consumption, you must have 4 feet between for pedestrian clearance. And in this proposed ordinance, outdoor dining, where you actually have a server, it's 5 foot. So I guess my question is, what's the recommendation here for accurate pedestrian clearance if we were have something on the curb and sidewalk?
I mean, if you're going to be on Bay Avenue with this, I think you need a 6-foot clear sidewalk
Okay.
along Bay Avenue to have people, the amount of people we have down here going in both directions. I don't know if that leaves you 5 feet after that
Right.
to do something. With telephone poles and everything else out there, getting a 6-foot clearance is difficult.
Okay, because in our outdoor food consumption that we already have, it's just a 4-foot clearance.
And
For,
that's
like-
without waitress service.
Yes.
So if somebody goes and sits at a 2-top table, they can do that within 4 feet of the building.
Yeah,
If you put a waitress out there, then it's a whole different story.
correct.
And they also have to take the tables and chairs from inside and put them outside, and then at the end of the day, put them back in.
Right.
Right.
Not additional seating. It's,
No, I understand. I'm not concerned about additional seating as much as other people trying to pass this.
yeah, I'm just saying that's what makes it different from what we're trying to do. They wouldn't have to bring it in every night.
They would be able to leave it out, like outside dining, just leave the tables and chairs out, right?
Yeah.
So you're recommending 6 foot and we have 5 foot in there.
You have 5 foot of clearance, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's a busy
Mhm.
pedestrian area.
Right, I agree. I'm looking for the expert opinion here.
I guess I'm getting thrown under the bus. So anyway,
Yes.
I like 6 foot myself. 5's gonna be tight. You know, people come down with a stroller or something like that, and you have people trying to pass. You got a waitress standing out there. I think it's tight.
Mhm. Well,
On
I cer-
average, how wide are our sidewalks in town?
Well, that's a good question, because I don't know if we have that answer. I think,
Yeah.
you know, if you go to certain areas, it might only be 10 feet from the building to the curb.
And less than others.
And then if you have a car pulling into an angled space and they're overhanging the sidewalk, you have less.
I think
Mhm.
our streetscape design puts a
Mhm.
crack too.
Yeah, I don't know if you have the space, but you know, I mean, you have a few restaurants along there that are obviously impacted by this.
Mhm. I think we saw last summer, I know I certainly did. I walked those sidewalks a lot. And boy, there's an area up there that I watched people in one of the worst sections of town having to go out into the boulevard around the cars that were angle parked to safely get by because the sidewalk was completely jammed.
Yeah.
That's what scares me with this. It really does. I know there are some sidewalks like along Center Street where they are wider, and we already have a couple of restaurants that have gotten approval to have tables out there. I get that. I'm just concerned about where it's not real big. And Frank, you and I have spoken many times about the streetscape, that while it's lovely and,
Right.
very, it is also not functional in many parts of town. And it's going to impede even further if we've got tables out there. Having said that, I, my whole thing from the very beginning was I just wanted to go back to the way it was. I've had a lot of people talk to me, and okay, I understand that, if there is the room, I'm okay with it. And there are also places that I drove around town a lot this weekend. They have like a lawn or something like that, a little spot where they can do it. And in that case, I would say yes. As far as sidewalks though, without that clearance and umbrellas and other things that hang out and, potentially lethal, actually, I just don't see that. And certainly, absolutely, I'm adamant about not giving up any private parking. Even though we're talking about sidewalks, I'll throw my 2 cents in there.
I think too, some conversation that's come up since we first started talking about this last week is, do we really need something like this? Is this something that we're seeing that the land use board is getting bombarded with people asking for site plan, changes to what they want for their business? And are businesses really going to benefit and utilize this ordinance? Is this something that Beach Haven can functionally do? There are towns that block off streets and do it in the summertime. We cannot do that. We can't do that. We don't want to give away parking lots because parking is a premium, as we all know, where people want to park. So I'm just wondering if this should be almost like, depending on what happens with this pandemic, as some like to call still, is it something that's even necessary to do moving forward? Or is this something that should be like a plan B, where we say, hey, if this happens again and there's an executive order, we have this in place? So those are just my thoughts moving forward after I've read over this and looked over it and seeing, what the time frame would be and how this looks, and is it really something that majority of the businesses are going to utilize this year? Those are my thoughts.
So you're thinking that you would just leave it up to the land use board to hear any applications for expanded use, and then if we end up with another executive order from the governor, that we could put what we're drafting right now into place as an executive order. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that is what I'm saying in this situation.
Okay.
I mean, I think I said it in the last meeting. I enjoy sitting outside. I think it's nice to have cafes and sidewalks but this space that we have here is really challenging to make that be functional for everybody. You know, in the off season, sure, but everyone's inside now. So, you know, what's the difference between, you know, COVID now and COVID in the summertime kind of thing. So. My 2 cents.
Thank you.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with Chris, but I thought one of the main drives for this conversation was the popularity of people that enjoy town, having people outside, which I don't disagree with. And I also, I want to touch on a point I made at the last meeting, that our parking regulations have been watered down a few times already, to what many feel are the detriment of the town as far as restaurant seatings and things like that. I think it's 600 square foot per parking spot at this point, you know, of occupancy per parking spot is the code. I think that is extremely generous as it sits already. So I'm not really too much in favor of giving away parking, even if it's on their property. Based on that, you know, I know we have a number of very large restaurants, as a matter of fact, that have no parking. One of them just got bigger and they don't have any parking. So I think that's a slippery slope if we further water down that ordinance to allow any tents or outdoor seating in their parking lots. I think Frank's recommendation, a 6-foot sidewalk, is really going to limit it, but I think it's a responsible limitation. I think it makes safety a priority, which we should in this case. Sidewalks are supposed to be where people are safely supposed to travel along the roadway. And there are some places in town that can accommodate that for sure. But it's going to definitely hinder a lot of the businesses along Bay Avenue. A lot of the restaurants there. I can only really think of a few that, well, one in particular, without naming names, that this is really going to greatly affect, even though they just expanded their indoor seating quite a bit. So, I mean, I'm okay with the outdoor seating, granted that we moved that to a 6-foot clearance. And I'm really, you know, not too much in favor of giving away any more parking.
Okay.
I'll chime in. I tend to agree with Dan. I think the 6-foot right of way is a good way to go. And I like the idea of people outside having fun. I think it helps some of the businesses. I think if you think about it, there's really not that many businesses that this is going to be applicable to. I think some of the bigger businesses are going to look for something more permanent. But in the case of, for example, the Holiday Snack Bar that does have some ground there, I think that helps them a lot. And I really do feel that this COVID thing is not going away. And I think people do feel more comfortable outside, particularly in the summer when it's crowded. You don't want to be crammed into little spaces with air conditioning. So I think having that outdoor available, if it works, if it's applicable, if it doesn't create safety hazards, is good. And it gives Beach Haven somewhat of a festive appearance and people like it. But I do think we have to look at where it's feasible and where it isn't.
Okay.
But I guess then my question to that statement, Nancy, is it something that requires an ordinance, or can this be something that, like, Holiday Snack Bar can come before the land use board and ask for outside seating?
You could, I think that's really up to Sherry. I think Sherry sort of feels that way too. It probably maybe doesn't require an ordinance. How many places are really going to be affected by this?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it doesn't require an ordinance, although having some guidelines is helpful. I mean, if you have an ordinance and say you need a 6-foot right of way on the sidewalk, people right away know, I have to have that. My spot doesn't allow for that. But so having some guidelines in an ordinance might be helpful, but I would leave that up to Sherry. I think it's
I
a-
agree with you, Nancy. The land use, being a former member of the land use board, the land use board is always looking for guidelines, especially from council. So I think this gives an opportunity for restaurants to even try it out temporarily and just paying the permit fee, and then they could go to the land use board for a permanent fix, and then they would not have to keep paying the fee every year. They could ask for something permanent and even increase their seating capacity to include the outside and the inside for places like, the clam bar, the snack bar, that they would go for a more permanent after they tried something temporary.
right.
Because it's expensive, to go to the land use board. So this gives an opportunity and also guidelines.
Yeah, it does give the guidelines, and it's not preventing anybody from going to the land use board.
Right.
Right.
Jamie, were you still interested in doing like a percentage cap?
No, you were correct on that. It's when you're trying, because I saw the part about music and performances and stuff like that. And it was trying to limit the amount of people outside, to limit the noise in different residential areas. But I think that, eliminating like a performance type or something like that is going to be sufficient enough. I don't.
Okay. Okay. Colleen, anything else?
No, like I said, my biggest concern is the parking and the safety in the sidewalks. Nothing that would include a private parking lot, certainly not a public parking lot. And if they have the 6-foot clearance or another spot, as we noted, some lawns, I'm okay with that. And I do think it is good to give the land use board some kind of guidelines. Otherwise, we just completely dump it in their court, and, maybe they feel a lot differently about the parking or something like that. And I think it's important that maybe we come up with our own.
Okay, I will make the revisions that I hear from you all today and put it back in the ordinance, and we'll see if we're closer to an introduction at the next meeting, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, number 2 on general discussion is some proposed changes to the parking ordinance, and I'll hand that over to Jamie.
So Frank, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm not
So-
sure about that.
We've talked many times about the reasoning behind amending the parking ordinance, which I think was in 2013. So in 2013, the old parking ordinance had all the different businesses kind of separated. A restaurant needs this amount of parking, a barber shop needs this amount of parking. It really kind of separated everything. And the new parking ordinance kind of consolidated every business with one requirement, and that's one parking spot per 600 square feet. It kept all the housing, bedrooms, everything the same. But now what I'm seeing is that, our town and our business district is evolving in that properties are being built, they're going to be torn down, they're going to be rebuilt. And I think that especially for restaurants and restaurants/bars, taverns, that we need to possibly go back to an increase in the requirements. Now, in 2013, it was thought, well, there is no land for parking. So this is why this is the reasoning. But now that we are tearing down and rebuilding, there could be an opportunity to have more parking. And a use like a restaurant, it increases, you need more parking if you're going to have a 2,000 square foot or more restaurant. So I guess what I'm asking council to consider is to increase the amount of parking for restaurants. So it would be, the old parking ordinance was one parking spot per 125 square foot for a restaurant and one parking spot per 100 square foot of a bar / tavern. Now, I don't know if that's something we need to go for, but I would maybe like to see it increase 1 parking spot per 200 or 250 square feet, because I think that that's required if we're going to be moving forward with tearing down businesses and rebuilding for restaurants.
Right, so I think back when that parking was looked at, and we looked at all the businesses in town, and we looked at who met the ordinance and who didn't. I think 90% of the businesses didn't meet any of those prior parking ordinances. But, what we did notice though is that since we did the 1 per 600, then retail, restaurants, everything falls in the same category, and it gets a little bit difficult because in order for something to become like a retail to go to a restaurant, technically the parking's the same. So there's no stringent requirement. So I would tend to agree that we should make a change. I don't think 1 per 100 or 1 per 125 is the number. I mean, realistically, if you take a 50 by 100 lot, you might get 18 parking spaces in a lot that size. That 5,000 square foot, that's, some of our businesses aren't even on that size lot. So you would almost need a 10,000 square foot lot to provide 18 parking spaces in a restaurant at, say, 1 per 250. So I would tend to agree we need something different for restaurants. But again, we've had recent applications, as Dan mentioned, with absolutely no parking. And you gave them variances because there's nothing
Right.
else you can do. Or you
There-
deny the application and don't let them have a restaurant.
Right, but they were existing they were existing nonconformities.
Yeah.
My main concern is that I
Mhm.
potentially have, new restaurants, and
Right.
even some of the restaurants that we do currently have in town do have a lot of parking, and I would,
Right.
if they would sell in the future, they could actually, get rid of that
Right.
parking because
So, so maybe a number like 1 per 250, or you go back to the seating, the parking based on the number of seats. I think we need to look at it quickly because there's a lot of stuff that could be going on in the next several months. Site plan wise, as you said, there's other things that may be coming in. So I'd have to just take a couple of examples and take a look at, say, a 10,000 square foot lot and, look at how many seats you could physically get into a smaller building and then go from there and try to hone in on a different number. But at a minimum, 1 per 250, 1 per 300 for a restaurant would be, having what we currently have at 1 per 600. So. But if we take a look at a couple of examples, a couple sites that we know potentially could have something, we can look at them.
I think we need to look at it again. I guess the thing that I find somewhat egregious is the fact that you have a change of use of a building that was, say, a beauty parlor, and now you're changing the use to a restaurant. And there's absolutely no parking spaces. I think that you need to consider that. Right now, we say, oh yeah, well, they're grandfathered in, there's no way they can provide parking. But it wasn't much of a hassle when maybe 2 or 3 people were in the building at any one time. But when you have a restaurant where you have 60 people sitting down and maybe 10 or 15 cars needing parking, I think it just, we need to rethink how we're going to do this. And the problem is there just isn't parking. And I mean, I've tried to, one of my ideas is anytime somebody wants to change the use or add seats to a restaurant, if there was a way that they could have a certain donation they had to give to the town that would enable us to accrue money that would enable us to perhaps buy some property close to the parking, the business district that would provide another public parking area. There's got to be innovative ways that we can help businesses But right now, it really is rather unfair. We really need to relook at this and come up with a good idea. Unfortunately, the best spot in the world for parking would be where the electric company owns that land. And obviously, they don't want to sell it, but there's got to be innovative ways that when people want to expand their business and they don't have parking, that we can come up with a way to provide parking in the future.
I don't disagree that we should revisit this, but I think we have to be careful with the numbers that we set, because this is just going to potentially create a storm for the land use board.
Yeah.
The other potential problem is if a business or restaurant sells that has no parking, does that trigger a non-conformity? Then they now have to go in front of the land use board for it too. I don't necessarily disagree with the need for that, for a new number, but I think we have to do our homework on this and get it right. That way we don't kind of rock the boat too hard, take water on. So,
Yeah, I agree. We need to do a little more research, Frank. Certainly your input is necessary in this. And I'd like to wait and hear what's coming down the pike before I make any judgments.
All right, well, let me take a look at some typical examples and maybe do a couple of quick sketches just to see how much parking you can get on a particular lot and what that will leave you for the size of a business based on, 1 per 250 or 1 per 300. Or for that matter, look at the number of seats, because I thought at one point the ordinance had like 1 space per 3 seats. Maybe that has to be 1 per 4 or something like that, but I'll take a look and get back to you relatively quickly, because whatever we do, we don't want to let it hang around for too long.
Anything else as far as discussion on the outdoor dining goes?
Parking.
I'm sorry. That's not on my sheet, so I'm looking at the one on my sheet. Yes, I'm sorry. The parking. No?
Okay.
Okay. So should we move on then to the approval of the bills?
Yes, I have a bill list this evening in the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
Can I just put one more, since we have Frank here, it's like, can I have one more discussion added?
Mhm.
Okay, so Frank, we don't really have a lot as far as like pilings in our code, and I was just wondering, like, with the pilings, they used to just like, hammer them in, and now they have more of like a dun 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 dun, like not really banging them in. But
Right.
are other towns requiring to first drill the holes first before they put in the pilings to reduce the kind of impact on the surrounding houses? Because there's just so many pilings being put in, could
Yeah,
this?
most of the pile drivers do try to auger, the first 4 or 5 feet to get through some of the harder material before they'll set the piling and then put a vibratory hammer on it. I don't
Right.
know if the ordinances specifically say that, but
It
a
doesn't.
lot of these guys are finding that it's easier. The first 3 or 4 feet sometime is pretty well compacted. So you're really impacting the adjoining home, even when you vibrate them in.
Right. Well, I mean, are other towns making that a requirement? Because what I'm finding is that, maybe one piling company only are putting in so many pilings that
Right.
the auger is at a different job site. So then they're just
Yeah.
forcing them in. And then when it could be done a lot, more efficiently if they would just wait a little bit, and it's a lot less of a stressful environment for the house.
I'd have to check, but normally when we do, I think when we did municipal projects, we typically, I've always found that they're augering the piles in. I mean, we're usually dealing with 30, 35, 40-foot piles on a municipal type project. So, they don't want to stand them up that high. They'll try to auger the first 8 feet and drop it in the hole first.
Right.
But I'd have to check. This is a good question, and I don't have an answer, right? Because I don't know what the other towns are really requiring. But I agree. If you auger, then there's less impact on the adjoiners than when you start right at the top of the ground,
Right.
start trying to vibrate them.
I didn't know if more towns were making that more of a requirement again, since of the,
Right.
you know, intensity of the rebuilding phase that I think every town is in right now.
Well, the only thing I can do is I can check a couple of towns, towns on the island, and I can let you know. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Jamie. I have a bill list tonight in the amount of $378,275.68.
Did everybody have a chance to review the bills? Any questions or concerns? No? Is there a motion to approve the bills?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Ball Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Davis,
Yes,
Mrs. Rutherford,
Yes.
Mayor Lambert.
Yes. Okay, looks like we're down to public comment. So all the usual rules apply. Please make yourself known by raising your electronic hand or somehow or other getting Sherry's attention. State your name and address, and please hold your comments to 3 minutes.
Theodora Lambert,
Hi, everybody. This is Jim Lambert using Theodora's computer. Good evening, and thank you for this chance to speak. My address is 516 North Atlantic Avenue in Beach Haven. I just want to make a couple of recommendations for your consideration with respect to the outdoor dining discussion. My thought is it should only be allowed on private property. It should not encumber any public space or public sidewalk at all. Another suggestion would be don't sacrifice any parking spaces in any private parking lots for outdoor dining. That's my opinion. And lastly, just an observation. I heard the conversation about a 6-foot minimum clear, and I think that's a really good idea. But keep in mind that sidewalk right now along the boulevard at least has trash cans, recycle cans, there's utility poles, there's fire hydrants. So that has to be factored into the discussion of where the tables are allowed and more importantly, where the clear, safe pedestrian egress remains. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public wish to be heard? Mr. Harvey?
Thank you, Sherry. John Harvey, 211 2nd Street. Yeah, I listened to the audio videotape of last week's meeting, and I continue to be a little bit confused about what we're trying to solve for. Last week, I think you had Frank Padilla from Tucker's on, and he was looking for insight from his own property parking. And now it seems like the conversation has gone to sidewalk dining, right? And the summer's coming. We've got a number of issues. And so, I off of last week's conversation, and it sort of touches on what Jim said, I started saying, okay, what's the categories of businesses today? And I said, there's some that use their own space for outdoor seating, Buckaloo's, Tucker's, Carmen's, Harvey Cedar Shellfish. They have those tables outside, which doesn't seem to impede anything. Then you got some places last year that used municipal owned space, Barry's, Ship Bottom Brewery, and the Triton. Right, and then you have some that uses public sidewalk for sitting. Uncle Will's, the Marlin, the Shack, the Holidays, Chicken or the Egg, and so I'm all for what you're saying about sidewalk dining, but I think there's some bigger issues. And one of the concerns I have about the why here is the conversation keeps going between what's nice, what people like versus what's needed. And I think Frank was making that case last week. And I think we got to decide, it's always going to be between different criteria. So is it about what makes it more fun, or is it what makes impact on traffic or impact on safety? And we keep going between those different criteria without coming down with a specific issue. Finally, I'm still confused. There was one council member who last week said, there's no parking problem in my mind. And then today the comment was there just isn't any parking. And so do we really know what we're trying to solve for? with this. And so I say go forward with your sidewalk parking ordinance, however you think is right. But I think you got some other big issues that need to be resolved. And finally, I'd say, people say, oh, COVID's going to be here forever. The world's going to be different. We know that. I don't know what that means. And like Chris said on the pickleball, I think come up with a plan A, with a plan B, and then a date to assess and activate plan B if it's needed, both with pickleball. We don't pull things back. That's not been our history. I can't think of one thing where we said, let's go with it, and it didn't work, so let's stop it in a short period of time. And we're talking a 12-week period this summer. So I strongly encourage you to look at some plan A, plan B scenarios for some of these real difficult dilemmas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Wachusen?
Hi, Mary Wischusen, 134 Center Street. I would like to go along with what Mayor Lambert said about having, going back to the way things were before COVID. She didn't say it in those words, but I don't think we need any more outside dining than we did in 2019 for all kinds of reasons, parking reasons, public safety reasons, and especially noise reasons. I know I'm still not clear about what this ordinance is going to say about outside music and theatrical performances, which have been really the bane of our existence over the last 2 summers. We can't really exist anymore in this town the way that the Showplace made us exist over the past 2 summers. So that's one thing that I really need to get out there. And with that in mind, so I'm not sure, I guess I'll just wait and see what happens with the ordinance. But there's another and related issue, in my opinion, that regards noise during the day coming from the Surflight complex. We lived in our house for 22 years, and I think we existed rather peacefully with the Surflight and the Showplace, even during the day when they had rehearsals outdoors. It was appropriate for the most part, but it has not been appropriate over the past 2 summers. From 8 o'clock in the morning until the Showplace show would start, which is another whole thing, at 6 o'clock, we listened to amplified music, there's singing, there's loud everything coming from over there. From 8 o'clock in the morning, there were rehearsals not only in the courtyard, but there were rehearsals on Center Street. Sometimes people going to the beach had to go out into traffic on Center Street because they couldn't, there were dancers who were actually blocking the entire sidewalk. We never called the police, even though I know I looked at the code book and those kinds of noises are disallowed in Beach Haven. There's several noise ordinances that I think would take care of that, but they weren't enforced. I never called the police until the week after Labor Day, when there was a rock band that was practicing all during the week from 9 in the morning until 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night. One of the officers responded and told them to turn it down. Another officer, a different night, said, oh no, they're allowed to be as loud as they want until 11 o'clock at night, because it was a Friday, that particular time. So I think we really need some kind of a control put on some of the businesses, and in my opinion, that business particularly, because I think they take advantage of how much good they do for the town. And granted, they do a lot of good for the town, and I understand that, but they can't completely take away the rights of the residents. So I'm hoping that maybe sometimes even the daytime enforcement of the noise ordinance will happen this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. John Halpern?
Hi, John Halpern, 319 Fairview Avenue, also president of the Beach Haven Taxpayers Association. I'll reiterate some of my comments I made at the last meeting and add a few others regarding the outdoor dining. We would love to be in a situation where we're at the pre-pandemic levels. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Omicron, the virus is still surging. We should do everything in our power to make it more comfortable for the public regarding outdoor dining. In addition, as we know, Fred's Diner is no longer in existence. My understanding, they're replacing with a candy store. That means the potential number of outdoor dining seats is being eliminated. We're concerned moving forward that there's going to be extensive wait time if outdoor dining is limited. I do agree with council that under no circumstances should parking be impacted or mitigated due to outdoor dining. I do agree public safety is a concern on sidewalks, but that being said, we should do everything in our power to make the public comfortable regarding outdoor dining. And in addition, when we have more available seating for people to come into town, it not only helps our restaurant businesses, but it has a residual effect of helping our other businesses in our community. So again, I would support outdoor dining with the caveats of no impact to parking and with the caveat that there be a close look at the concerns of public safety on our sidewalks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Deb Whitcraft?
Yeah, Deb Whitcraft, 528 Dock Road, Beach Haven, New Jersey. I know you're looking at my dogs there in the picture. I just came back from a first aid call, so I did not hear the beginning part of this ordinance. But when are we able to look at this ordinance, Barry?
Which one are you talking about?
The ordinance that pertains to outdoor dining, tents, etc.
The councils did not introduce it tonight. They've requested some more changes, so we'll bring another draft to the table at the end of the month. I think the 27th is the next meeting.
All right, so no one will be able to look at that until then.
Right.
Well, I just personally, although I'm vice president to John Helper and our president of the Taxpayers Association, I'm just speaking for myself that, you know, we all understand the impact that the COVID has had on businesses, but we seem to be centering and focusing on restaurants and bars. There's a lot of businesses impacted by COVID. And anything that, as John said, I agree with this, anything that impacts parking or takes away any of the parking, John wants to make it comfortable for people to enjoy our town and our restaurants and businesses and all that. But in order to make them more comfortable, you need to put back the parking spaces that have been taken away by businesses that are utilizing that space for tents and tables and all that. I don't disagree with the use of outdoor dining, provided that there's a clear pathway for pedestrians and people who want to use the sidewalks as they should. But if we utilize any public parking spaces for tents or for expanded dining, then I think that is a serious detriment to the public, and it impacts all the businesses when you force people to keep driving in circles trying to find a parking space. So I just want to say that I'm totally in favor with what Mayor Lambert said last time, that you know, enough is enough, and we need to go back to taking care of the entire town and providing the parking for the people who come to visit Beach Haven. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Amanda Burden?
Hi, Amanda Bergen, 218 Amber Street. I also missed the beginning of this. I'm sorry. I work in a hospital and am dealing with COVID and have been through this whole experience. I would love to believe whoever says it's going to be over. Boy, it's hard to imagine that it's going to be over. There's just so many issues that people unfortunately are facing that don't seem like they're going away. I do think that the outdoors, the feeling that you can be safe outdoors from a health perspective. As people eating, bars are one of the toughest places. So I really appreciate that the town made that happen. I also appreciate that you tried to do it in a nice way, kind of like a Morristown would do it, or something of that nature. And I agreed with the person the people who all said, we really have to support our businesses. They have 12 weeks to make it. And I really think it's imperative that we make sure that we make Beach Haven a good place to be a business person, because I think that they go a long way to making our Beach Haven so special. I also really appreciated the surf light, and I'm so sorry that it was rough on the person who spoke up, but it was magical to be able to walk into outside seating and just kind of come off the beach almost and go see a play was really amazing. So I'm sorry that must have really been painful, but it was, I wonder if there's some way to make that still work so that the theater outside could happen, because I think that also made Beach Haven really a magical, even more special than we all sort of know it to be. And I hear what people are saying about parking. People are there on the island with their cars anyway, and they got to put their cars somewhere. They don't have to bring their cars to the restaurant. And they found other ways to get to those restaurants, to get to those stores when they had to. And it's parking doesn't increase property values. People don't come to see a parking lot. They come to see, beautiful Beach Haven. So I just, that's the only point I'll say. So thanks so much for allowing me to speak. I really appreciate it. And thanks for considering this. I very much support outside activities, dining, business activities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank-
Lori Messler, did you want to be heard? I see that you are unmuted. Okay. Any other member of the public wish to be heard? Seeing none?
Seeing none, we will close public comment and we will go to final remarks by council. And I believe, Mrs. Rutherford, you get to kick us off this time.
Hey, well, I would just want to thank folks for their input for the outdoor dining ordinance consideration. It's very helpful to understand what our town wants, what we think we need to do moving forward, how it is managed. After hearing more folks talk about having it as an ordinance as guidance for land use, that's probably changed some of my thought process on that. Maybe that is something we need to do. If that is something we need to, that's the problem, as Mr. Harvey so kindly said, if that's the problem we're trying to solve for. So thank you for the input there, everyone. And that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you. And then we go on to Dr. Davis.
I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Mrs. Bellmiller.
Yes, I think I've spoken enough tonight. Thank you, Frank, for coming. It's always great to go back and forth with you and have your expert opinion. And thank you, everyone, for coming. It seems like fortunately, we are back to a Zoom meeting schedule, but hopefully that it is just temporary. However, everyone, please be safe. And that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Allen.
Yeah, I just kind of want to echo what Jamie had said. I think we gave Frank a lot of work to do tonight. We gave him a lot of questions, and I appreciate his input on all of this stuff. He's very informative and knowledgeable. And outside of that, I just want to remind everybody, tomorrow's going to be super cold, so watch your pipes. And hope everyone has a safe rest of the month until we meet again.
Thank you. That leaves me. And basically, I just want to thank everybody for participating tonight. you know, these are a lot of important issues facing our town, and we do appreciate your input and the discussion. And stay safe, stay warm, and again, thank you very much. So on that note, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Being adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You.
Right.